This is this month's guest speaker, Chris, who is going to talk to us about public speaking and presentation skills. So there's a lot that we can learn from him. I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. So I'm going to jump straight in because this is a very significant topic, but I really want to leave you with some actionable takeaways, but most importantly, share my personal journey into how I became confident enough to do things like this today. So first and foremost, my name is Chris Modica. I'm a chief architect here at Microsoft Australia, New Zealand. Been at Microsoft just over a year, was working with a competitor before that. But most importantly, I've pretty much spent most of my career as a customer, starting my journey out where a lot of you will be starting, if not already, as an engineering cadet way back. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Now, I really like to start with some facts and figures, and I'm intentionally doing this today because what I'm going to teach you is some little tidbits and techniques that you can take away from today and apply with your own presentation journey. Now, I appreciate it's online and a lot of you are probably going to watch this on demand. I like to do this in person and in a room generally, but there's some key figures that are really interesting. I'm going to land with some actionable takeaways on how we can apply some techniques to address some of the things I'm going to talk about. So first and foremost, 27 seconds. It's actually the amount of time that you have, regardless of how you're presenting, online or in person, to make a first impression. So after 27 seconds, people have decided or they have an opinion on you, right? Really, really important when we're talking about credibility and presentation. We're going to come back to that one. 3 seconds and 3 days. So 3 seconds is actually the amount of time that as humans, we've made a subconscious decision on whether I'm going to pay attention. Right? Really interesting. Right? So for everyone on the call today, you saw my face, you've heard my voice, and you've made a decision whether you're going to hang on or you're going to tune out. Right? Really difficult in a hybrid environment. So going to come back to how do we tap into that and how do we maximize that? What 3 days? So really important when we're talking about visual and presentation style. 60% of people after 3 days will remember the visual, interactive, or video elements of your presentation. They're not going to remember text. So how do we tap into that to make sure people listening to things like today actually have recall after the presentation itself? 22% of people are more likely to remember what you say if you share personal stories. So when I started out my journey, I was very fact-based and coming from an engineering mindset, right? Really good at the moment, but people will struggle with recall. So how do we use personal techniques and personal stories to actually give people something relatable that they can learn and adapt from your individual presentation? And last but not least, and it's why I'm here and why I do a lot in industry, 17% is actually a current figure from 2022 on representation of speakers in market. And the 17% is actually global analysis around tech conferences on traditionally non-males. So that can be everything from women presenters, people from different backgrounds. So we've done a little bit to improve that as an industry, but a very significant runway to go. And I like to look at that on the opposite side. Significant amount of opportunity for people to step up and apply themselves to help the industry improve in this space. Because the way that we get better is seeing similar people with similar backgrounds and seeing people share diverse experiences. Now, I'm intentionally using this as an ugly slide because I'm going to talk about why you shouldn't use text-based in a second, but I'm not going to be able to cover everything that I would love to talk about today. I want to really maximize the time that we have and leave some time for questions. What I'm going to touch on with the time that we have is what I consider how to become an effective public speaker. And I intentionally use the words there, become, right? None of us, regardless of the level or the confidence or where people are presenting, became this overnight. We all started with where you're at now. I actually started as an engineer. You heard me touch on that earlier. And I was a very stereotypical engineer. I presented as an introvert, really shy. Right? So one of the last things I ever considered myself doing was presenting on large scale keynote presentations. But I do that and I love doing that these days. Right? So how do I get from I love coding and sitting at my workstation by myself to having enough confidence to be able to do things like these things today? And I trust a lot of you on the line might be in a similar situation. And so I want to talk to you through my own journey on how did I use personal hacks to get myself to where I am today. So huge takeaway is you don't become an amazing speaker overnight. It requires a lot of grit, but small steps. Right? And I'm going to touch on some things that I did in my own journey to help you get there. Now, I like to spend a lot of time talking about presenting your true self. And I'm a significant believer of this because it leads to what we call authenticity. And I'm going to explain that in a second. But this slide and a lot of the references I'm leaving you with today. So when I introduce concepts, I'll have links around it. So I'll share this pack via Michelle off today. No issues there at all. So don't worry about needing to take notes. But I start here because one of the biggest mistakes that individuals can make when they start on their journey is trying to be something they're not. Right? Now, you can do a great presentation doing that, but your audience is going to pick up on it. They're going to see that you're presenting a different persona to you as an individual. You're trying to match someone else's style. Right? The bigger the audience, the more people are going to see it. So starting with your journey, it's really important to acknowledge, and we intentionally use this slide, what personal style do you aspire and resonate with? So for me, coming from an analytical and engineering background, I sit in the top left. I have a lot of knowledge and information that I love sharing. And if I can do that well, the passion and confidence and everything comes with that. But my anti-type is performer. You're not going to see me dancing on stage, jumping up and down. I might do it, but that's not my personal presentation style. Now, regardless of whether you've presented or not, some of this will resonate with you today. Right? You will somewhat identify with one of these four. And if you can tap into that, that's how you're going to build confidence. That's how you're going to build authenticity. But most importantly, that's how you're going to grow and navigate your personal presentation style. Because if you try and fight that too much, you're not going to land great presentations, or you're going to land great presentations that people are going to see you as non-genuine or non-authentic because you're just presenting something for the sake of it. Right? And we see a fair bit of this in technology, especially in the global conferences. So some of the best speakers that you'll ever come across are people that really understand their personality style, one of these four at a high level, and people that are authentic. So just something to think about. I've mentioned the word authentic many times already. It's because I believe it. Right? If you know your true self and you learn more, and I'm going to share a lot of information and content with you today, there's no shortage of information. You can learn different techniques and styles, so continuous improvement and continuous learning. And if you do that based on authenticity, it's going to give you a lot of things. Number one, if you're authentic, it's actually a hack to address confidence. Right? I'm being myself, and I've done that a couple of times, then I'm going to be a lot more confident. If I'm trying to be something else or match a particular style, guess what? I'm probably not going to be as confident. Another important thing with authenticity, and I'm going to share some of the insights later is sharing personal journeys and anecdotes. That's a way to connect with people. Remember one of the figures I said, a lot of what people take away is how you present on the day. And a lot of the recall post 2 to 3 days is actually how well you did that. So being able to connect with your audience, regardless of the format, is so significant. And guess what? If you're authentic, and you can hopefully see it with my chat today, I'm going to be very passionate about it. And I'm touching on my little Italian background here. I'm half Italian Australian. We, as Europeans, we talk with our hands. So as we're passionate, we're talking with our hands. I'm being authentic. I'm not intentionally doing this. And it's just part of me. And if we're doing all of that well, people are going to be engaged. They're going to listen and they're going to pay attention. I'd like to say in a large scale environment, especially hybrid, your biggest competitor for your chat is actually multitasking and mobile phones. And it's easier for me to see this in a conference hall or an equivalent. If I haven't landed this well, people are going to tune out. They're going to start looking at their text. They're going to start looking at email. So being authentic is so significant and probably one of the biggest takeaways I can give you. Because if you do this from the start, you're going to set yourself up on a lifetime of continuous engagement and more routine journeys. Now, inspiration from others is a double-edged sword, right? There's no shortage of people that might look at CEOs, so Satya from Microsoft, our GitHub CTO, and role equivalents. But the reality is they've been doing that for well over 30 years. So if we catch ourselves and recognize, well, I might want to be that one day, I probably can't be that today. And that's okay. So what I really try to tease out here is if you touch on the topics and do a little bit of self-reflection on your personal style, and remember I said I'm more of a information sharing, a wisdom individual, what you can then do through no shortage of online information, and there's a lot in front of us here, I'm going to come back to Reactor in a second, is you can see others that are similar to what your personal style is. And it's a little bit of a hack when you're getting started in your journey, because a lot of the techniques I'm going to take you through in the latter half of today, the people that are authentic and the people that are similar to the style that you might organically present with are going to be applying these techniques. So you can use, in particular, the far right to see how others are applying these techniques. Because the reality is they are applying these techniques if they're doing this well. They might not be trained, might not be polished around the techniques, but they're going to do a lot of what I'm giving you today. And on the far left, that's the North Star. That's where you want to aspire to in the future. The far right is within reach. And this is the communities. These are people like you starting their journeys, or like me at the start of my career. And I'm a significant believer of communities like Reactor and Meetup because it's first-time speakers. It's a nice, safe, friendly environment to try, practice, and contribute. And I'm going to finish on this today. You don't have to start by presenting. You can start by being involved. And a really nice way to start to get involved is to reach out to your community or meetup organizers and say, hey, I'm interested in one day being able to present at a meetup or Reactor. Is it okay if I shadow you to see what the admin or run looks like? A lot of the event organizers love that. And that's exactly how I got started way back. I didn't suddenly jump up at a meetup and start presenting. I started supporting others organizing. I started with opening, and then I built to being able to present. Right, so really little things go a long way. Now, there's no shortage of online presentation courses, how to present, and related topics. And what I'm sharing with you is 2 core themes on something that I personally practice and preach myself, And it's something that, looking back to my early stage career, I wish I knew earlier. And I intentionally have this quote on the screen, which is stop thinking about what you're trying to tell people and focus on what you're trying to communicate. And when we're starting our journey with presentations, we generally get it the wrong way around. We're really passionate about being able to share what we know. We're really passionate about demonstrating what we've applied. And we're really excited coming out of university because each of you that's watching this has a really unique position because technology is forever changing and it's changing at a rate that we ever have. So guess what? Most of us are all learning at the same time. And coming out of university or being in university, you're going to adapt to those newer concepts a lot faster than people that have been doing or been in the industry rather for over 20 plus years. Really good example that's top of mind is Azure Open API. So the significant movement with AI and new role types like prompt engineering and all the tooling coming there. Then we've got capabilities like GitHub Copilot. A lot of people want to know how to do it. And guess what? A lot of you are probably already experimenting and playing. So it's a really good way to start to get involved in the industry where there is no experts yet because it's so early. Right? And the takeaway for this slide is focus more on what we're trying to convey as opposed to oversharing too much. And the way that we do that is actually something called a story arc. Now, I didn't know about story arcs up until about 5 or so years ago. I was doing elements of this, but I never consciously thought about it. And the reason for that is no one really taught me how to present. I just started doing things differently, getting feedback, acting on that feedback, and trying different things. So I was adapting and applying. And if I knew about story arcs earlier, it might have fast tracked my journey. And there's a lot of theory and a lot of research on story arcs. But before I get into too much detail on this, think about your favorite movie. And Disney is a really good example of this. A lot of movies actually have a story arc in the entertainment world. I think they call it narrative arcs, but the concept is the same. There's a journey, they build the character, they tell you a story, and then there's a close. Right? Start, middle, finish. A lot of you know about that in your university courses if you've done a thesis or related, start, middle, finish. We've been doing that for a while. Story arc is one step beyond that. It's linking the journey end to end. And the reason I intentionally mentioned Disney is a lot of the 6 common story arcs Disney actually practices. Right? So Cinderella story, including the remake recently, that was about Cinderella starting in a challenging environment and then how she overcame those challenges and failures and then how she became the princess at the end of the movie. A similar story with Aladdin, right? Rags to Riches journey. So these techniques are actually applied in your favorite movies and shows. And what story arc becomes for us as presenters is a way to tell a story to help relatable actions and help us construct what we're trying to convey in a meaningful way. And the reason I say, I wish I knew about this earlier is when I started my career, I spent a lot of time building out content. And when you become really good at understanding story arcs, you actually spend less time building content and more time focused on what you're trying to convey. So these are real techniques. Some of the best presenters practice story arcs quite well. And it's a way to ring fence what you're trying to do. So as technologists or products and business individuals, we have a lot of information in our head. Same as today. I have a lot of information in my head, but I only have 45 minutes. So how can I aggregate some meaningful things that each of you want to know, and how can I shorten my time to prepare for today? Right? If I didn't use the story arc approach, I would spend a lot of time building out slides, going through it. Oh, I'm over time. I'm going to cut. Oh, I'm going to rejig this and that. Practicing a story arc approach helps you with your prep, and most importantly, saves you time. And if you can do it well, and it's a continuous improvement journey, it will help you become a great speaker. Now, I personally don't have this card pack yet. I'm interested in getting it, but Storyteller Tactics is a little cardware to get started. It's essentially all of the research-based story arcs that you can use for n number of presentations. And so if you're coming across story arcs for the first time, it could be a technique for you to use. It's essentially a 3-step process. There's the card on the far left, middle, and right. It helps you regardless of where you're at, whether you're trying to articulate a concept, whether you're trying to work out your personal style. It's like a choose your own adventure. So something to think about. A lot of research has gone into these cards, and the producer has actually built most of this off analyzing a lot of tech presenters, a lot of tech conferences, and a lot of business conferences. So there's no shortage of logos behind the research that's gone into that. But something a bit more easy without needing to purchase anything is this. I myself am not as disciplined as I'd like to be on this, but I am getting better. And the title for me is key there. Storyboard before slides and demos. I love to build. I love to jump into PowerPoint, jump into GitHub and start building. And that's worked well for me in my career to date. But I spent a lot of time doing that. And a story or paper-based approach is a way for me and everyone on the call to really be disciplined around a story arc. What am I trying to convey? What are the key things I need to land? What might my flow look like? And it doesn't need to be in PowerPoint. So what I'm trying to articulate here is use paper-based techniques or storyboarding techniques before you jump in and build. It'll save you a lot of time, but it'll save you a lot of rework. And the better that you can do this in terms of being disciplined, the better you're prepared you'll be for the actual presentation, because you're going to know your flow. You're going to catch your nervousness, because subconsciously in our brains, we've caught the fact that we've done a lot of prep. I've thought about how I'm going to present. I've thought about the flow. I've thought about it's a very powerful technique. Picking up the pace a little bit, know your setup. Catches a lot of first-time speakers. Right? Just because it works on your laptop doesn't mean it's going to work where you need to present. It can be anything from the far left to the far right. I'm presenting from home, or I'm presenting in an unknown environment. If I'm in an unknown environment, the far left, what I need to do is get there as early as possible. The closer I am to my presentation time, the less time I have to catch setup issues. The earlier I am, the greater the confidence I have in my setup, and guess what? The less nervous I'll be, because I know it's going to work. I know what transition between speakers will look like. I know what the room layout looks like. I know how to plug in and unplug. Knowing your setup is so critical, and something that a lot of us get wrong when we present in an unknown environment for the first time. Far right, your room. That's not my room. I wish I had a fancy setup like that. But regardless of your setup, and regardless of how confident you are, if you're presenting to an external audience for the first time, test your tooling before the preso. Know what tooling you're going to use. Not all conferences and not all customers have the same setup. Day to day, I use Teams, but a lot of my customers may not. They might have Zoom, they might have Citrix, they might have Google for Work, etc., etc. If I'm not using those day to day, even if they're installed on my computer, if I'm using that for the first time in about a couple of months, I'm probably going to have a layout change, some software updates to apply. My microphone may not work with the thing. These little things, going back to you have 3 seconds to land a first impression, can hurt the credibility at the start of a presentation. The more we can de-risk that in advance, the better it is. I personally don't use this yet, but if you haven't come across this feature, especially as first-time speakers, Speaker Coach in PowerPoint is something you might want to explore. Speaker Coach in PowerPoint is essentially AI. So it can listen to you as you present, it can help you with your timings, but most importantly, it can help you with your verbal language. Early in my career, and a lot of people still do this, we use filler words. Where we're unsure, we use filler words like basically, therefore, such as. Nothing wrong with that, but the earlier you have awareness that you're doing that, the earlier you can build techniques on how not to do that or how to not do it as frequently. Don't worry if you're doing that. Most speakers do. The difference between most speakers and great speakers is we have techniques on how to catch this. You haven't noticed me saying those filler words because I'm using a technique. The technique I use is to pause. I'm pausing to think. I'm not constantly talking. So that's my technique. Doesn't work for everybody. And you don't need to worry about this early as a presenter, but it's something to be aware of, and it's something to learn and adapt techniques to catch. Because the more filler words we use, the more our credibility might be challenged with some expert audience members. The less filler words we use, the more we're projecting confidence. But really good way to help you with improving your filler words. Accessibility. Not everyone has the same privileges that we do. There's a lot of individuals that use device-assisted hardware. They might be challenged with hearing. They might be challenged with visual impairment. The check accessibility function in PowerPoint can help you make sure that your presentation works or supports those devices. It's not something that I've always thought about in my career, but as I've increasingly become aware of the market at large, and as a technology community, we need to be more and more inclusive. We want to make sure that we're not unintentionally excluding them. So a way to do that is to make sure your presentation is compatible with the devices that they use. And simple things like visuals in our presentations actually need what's called metadata, a sample text-based equivalent to what that image is. So that if I'm vision impaired, it's going to give me an audio equivalent. If I don't do that, that person can't associate with the visual that you're talking to. Right? So something as basic as a visual representation can exclude a pretty significant audience if those metadata tags aren't correct in your presentation. So something to quickly check because it's easily fixed before you present. A bit of a rookie mistake, and a lot of us still do it today. If you're presenting, know your setup. So be aware of how do you block notifications. It's nothing more embarrassing than being in the middle of a presentation and someone sharing a personal message that pops up on my screen. Right? If you're Windows-based, the Do Not Disturb feature is the best way to block. If you're not Windows-based or you're using earlier versions of Windows, there's other associated equivalents. Shut down unnecessary applications. Be aware of how you can turn on D&D and only have the things open that you need. Power Toys. So if you're Windows-based, you may not have come across Power Toys in this stage of your journey. It's an open source supported add-on. It's something I use day to day. They're essentially advanced tools that can give you a little bit of an edge with using Windows, especially in this type of setup. There's a lot behind Power Toys. The link is there. There's two that I pretty much use day to day. Awake. If I'm doing presentations and I'm standing away from the lectern, or I'm not actively touching my keyboard and mouse, and my timeout is 10 seconds, my screen might lock. So it could be in the middle of a presentation, I'm presenting to an audience, especially in an in-person event, and my screen's locked. I lose time because I have to go back and unlock it, and it's a bit embarrassing because if I'm looking at the audience, I may not know what's going on behind me. So I use Awake to help me there. Just when I have Awake enabled, my computer won't go into a hibernate or sleep mode. Mute is another good example. Video conference mute, regardless of the setup I'm on, guarantees I'm on mute. Demos is another big one that I typically get asked about for early stage presenters. What do I do when things go wrong? I'm intentionally not talking about the common examples. You can go there and explore it yourself. But what I will say is things will go wrong. There's only so much prep and rehearsal you can do. And there's a couple of techniques that I'm going to give you today on how to catch that as best you can. First and foremost, your hardware might fail. Right? Coming out of university and even early stage in my career, I was a bit laissez-faire about this, right? I would have my presentation on my laptop and that was about it. Going back 20 years, we didn't really have cloud storage, and my backup might have been a USB drive if I was lucky. There's really no excuses for that these days. Plan for your hardware, your laptop, potentially not working. Defend against that by making sure you've got a highly available backup in OneDrive or an equivalent, so that if the worst case happens, you can use another device or a friend's device to present. Presentation 101, things can go wrong, file might get corrupted and all sorts of things, right? It does happen, happens more often than what you probably are aware of because most of us are using techniques like that. Similar story if you're using code. If my code only exists on my laptop and my laptop is not working, or I break the integrity of my dev environment, it's quite embarrassing if I have a live demo to do tomorrow. So the way I defend against that is I have personal repos in GitHub and everything I'm doing constantly commit. And if I've broken the integrity of my laptop, I can quickly restore from Git to a known working state. This is fairly new, and I'm not here to lead with Microsoft products, but it's just something I'm starting to use day to day. DevBox, and as students, you probably have access to Azure credits, so I did want to highlight this. DevBox is developer environment in the cloud. So really powerful for me day to day because I'm moving from mixed environments. I might be doing a Java-based demo, so I have dependencies around Java SDK and tooling equivalent. And then tomorrow I might be doing a C# or a .NET based demo. If I'm doing all of that on my laptop, which I do, there's a danger there that the demo I built a couple of months ago may not work today. And then I've got a time pressure on fixing that demo to get it working. Right? Very powerful way of me de-risking integrity issues on my laptop, software updates, SDKs breaking, maybe I've done something to muck up my code, is being able to go to a known state. This also helps me with hardware failure. Right? I've touched wood, haven't had too many of these, but I have had situations where I was a key speaker and the laptop I had didn't work, or I didn't have access to it. Generally happens when we're doing international conferences. You might have your hardware blocked in customs, you forgot to bring it to the office, whatever it is. It's easy to recover if I just have a PowerPoint. It's harder if I have an engineering demo. So DevBox is a powerful way as you get into technical demos to have a backup for your device. And it's pretty powerful because DevBox does work in a browser-based environment. So if worst case happens, I could present it on my tablet or iPad. I present it on a friendlies. And I don't need admin permissions if all I'm doing is accessing my dev box. So when I'm presenting in corporate environments, it removes the risk of me being unable to run my demo in that customer environment because of policies and restrictions. All I need is access to a browser, and I have my dev box and my technical demo ready to go. Changing gear a bit, it is normal to not be confident in speaking. Everybody, no matter what anyone says, starts here at some level. Sure, you might have done debating and public speaking in school. That was at school. You might be fortunate enough to be a hero in your university campus with clubs and equivalents. That helps you a bit, but you're still going to have a step change getting into a professional environment or getting out into technical meetups and technical presentations. So everyone starts from a different base, but everyone goes through this step change. So some two key figures there. The far right, I'll start with. 3/4 of people have a natural fear of presenting to large audiences. Very, very normal. Just not a lot of us talk about it. Most of us have it, but what we've done is develop techniques on how to catch it. And as a general population, 40% of people actually have a fear of presenting. Right? So those stats are essentially saying it is normal for everyone at their start of journey to have a fear, or at least lack of confidence around being able to present, also to large audiences. And I'm going to give you some techniques on things that you can do if you're not naturally resonating this way. Right? I shared my story at the start of today. I was that shy, introverted engineer, yet now I can do large-scale keynotes. I didn't get there in a year. I got there over a 10-year journey, but I got there through baby steps. The first one I'm going to introduce you to is Toastmasters. I personally haven't done Toastmasters for some time now, but Toastmasters actually exists globally. It's essentially gamification of presentation and building confidence. If you haven't come across Toastmasters and you're interested, have a look at the website. There is no shortage of clubs in your local location and also global. That's also a really good way to meet people when you go to another country or state if you're already involved in the Toastmaster community. Very social, friendly, supportive environment. And the visual there in front of us actually articulates what it's about. Experimental or gamified learning. It's a way to start to get basic techniques on some of the things I've touched on today. Building confidence, failing in a friendly environment and learning how to adapt and respond to failure, catching my filler words, ums and ahs, helping me with body language, helping me with personal stature, right? I wish I knew about Toastmasters earlier than I did, because a lot of those techniques I personally had to build without training. Toastmasters is a nice community to help you with your journey. And a lot of people are active in the Toastmaster community. That's one. Meetups and things like Reactor and many equivalents is another. But I mentioned the anecdote earlier. You may not be ready to present, but you could start to go to the events. Start to develop friendly faces, start to speak with the organizer to see how you could help, potentially open for the organizer, right? Most are very, very supportive of that. We want to grow future speakers and we want more and more people to be involved in speaking. We want to build out the diversity and breadth and depth of our speakers. So meetups and meetup community is a really powerful way to do that. And then when you're ready, it's also a powerful way to get going, right? Once you've got those friendlies and you're or going to a meetup with a topic that resonates with you and you're passionate with, it's actually quite easy in time to ask for a speaker slot. Don't feel like you have to step up and do a 1 hour presentation straight away. Right? You can become known to the organizer and say, hey, would it be okay if I could have 20 minutes? Right? Whatever you're comfortable with. Meetup is a really good way of doing that. And bit of a pro tip here. A lot of the big speakers that you'll resonate with and might aspire to become, a lot of us, regardless of how far we're on that journey, I'm definitely not at that level, we actually test out our content and our story arc at things like Meetup. We don't just get up and do a keynote with 10,000 people. I mean, we might, but it's pretty rare. What we've probably done is iterated on a presentation that we've teased out in meetups and other conferences before we do the global level. And the reason why we're doing that is it's friendly, it's an environment that we can experiment with, and it's an environment that we can test out on different audiences. Right? Different meetups have different communities and different stakeholders. It's a good way to test content in a friendly and safe environment, and then build to a local summit or conference, and then from there build to global. And a lot of your favorite speakers is exactly what everyone does. We use the local events to build and prove out new content, see what resonates with people, see what doesn't, change our style, build up confidence for demos, learn and adapt, and then we're ready for global. So most speakers do exactly that. CFPs. I didn't know about CFPs until later in my career. Sorry, I'm just going to do a quick time check. Until later in my career. And the reason why this is interesting is CFPs is how to get involved with public presentations. CFPs, Michelle is actually an expert on more so than me, but most presentations have a structured CFP process, which is all about involving n number of people, regardless of their experience, presentation style, and confidence, to become involved in the community. And the reason why it's interesting is CFPs is a way, regardless of your background and experience, to get involved. And even if you're not ready for these type of events, for something you aspire to get to one day, CFPs are a way to see how you might get there. A lot of the better conferences have guidance around what they're looking for. A lot of the bigger conferences also have guidance around sponsorship and how to get involved with early stage presenters. And so you don't need to be jumping into a conference yet, but for some of the conferences that you might aspire to get to one day as a speaker, start to have a look at their CFP process, because iterating back on what I said, you can get there through starting to prove that out in a meetup or your local community. Just going to jump forward the time that we have, because I want to make sure I give you some question time, and I think this is only 45 minutes, but could be wrong, but I'll speed up. I'm almost finished. Corporate training. Now, a lot of you, as you enter the workforce, ideally will have access to corporate training, presentation styles, how to present with confidence, and related topics. So if you're entering a graduate program or a cadetship program or an equivalent, hopefully you have access to this. If you become an employee, your employer will probably have, not always, formal training and training providers that they work with. If they don't, and you want to invest in self, there is no shortage of training providers out there that do presentation and presentation style with confidence. A lot of people always ask me about this. That's why I'm mentioning this. These are not personal recommendations. They're just ones I've done over the years, and I've done a fair amount over my last 15 years or so across different employers. the takeaway I'll give you if you are going to invest in self in this space is try and go towards the ones that teach you techniques on storytelling. And NIDA, which is actually normally actor training, is one of the best ones I've ever done. And audio is another one. Focus more on training to help you with storytelling and storytelling techniques. Right? The presentation techniques and the presentation styles, there's other resources that you can use. Michelle Playfair, only a couple of days ago, actually presented at the Range conference here in Australia. And as part of that, and her presentation and also the organizers, she actually has some really powerful go-to content on some of the themes that I touched on today, and also themes that I didn't touch on. So really good current reference on most of the themes that you're probably asking yourself of today. Online courses, LinkedIn Learning is a really powerful one that's within reach. Pluralsight, if you're into the technical training side, they have a lot of great content on this. But also edX. So edX is something I use on and off. It's a online freemium or freeware course content produced by some of the most leading global universities from Harvard, MIT, and equivalents. And since there's a lot of content there on presentation styles and equivalents, and what's really cool is a lot of it is not paid. So especially coming out of university as a student, right? You may not be able to afford the big corporate training. That's okay. I didn't either. These tools are within your reach. And with that, that's pretty much me done. The three takeaways I want to leave you with today is, regardless of where you're at, all of us started where you are. So everyone starts at your starting position. How quickly you get to where you want to is within your control. And if you don't own it, no one else will. Sometimes you might have good mentors and managers that will push you, but only you can do. Being authentic is key. So starting to present and know your style, being confident to present around the topics that you know, and being okay to not always follow the shining star if it's a topic that doesn't resonate with you. And last but not least, I like to say, dream big, start small, and be involved. Picture yourself presenting at a future keynote one day. Right? That's your dream big. Don't time box that. Right? It could happen next year. It could happen this year. It could happen in 10 years. Doesn't matter. That's where you want to get to. How are you going to get there? You're going to start small. You're going to start by taking some of the learnings from today and applying what I might do as a next step. I might do some online courses. I might be fortunate enough to be in an environment where I'm going to get access to paid training. I might just start to be more involved in my meetup. But I'm going to have an action, which is in the next 3 to 6 months. I really want to present something. And if I can leave you with that thought, give yourself an actionable next step on how you are going to take some of what I have shared with you today and make it meaningful. Take action. Hold yourself to account. Because if you don't, we'll be having the same conversation in a year and you haven't improved where you wanted to get to. So dream big, start small, and be involved. And with that, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your patience and attention. And I don't know how we're tracking for time, but more than happy to stay online to take some quick questions, if there is any.
Thank you so much, Chris. And that was such an insightful presentation on storytelling techniques and tactics. Personally, we've learned so much about the importance of crafting a compelling narrative structure, employing that vivid imagery, and of course, leveraging emotions to engage our audience on a more profound level. And one thing I personally took away from your presentation today is that storytelling is indeed a skill that can be developed and honed with practice, guidance, and of course, willingness to learn. Although some individuals may naturally possess a knack for storytelling, it is definitely a craft that can be cultivated and improved over time. So that was definitely a well thought messaging to all of our students here today. So just one quick question from us, especially that we have a technical student community in the call, is out of all the tips or techniques that was shared today, can you suggest one that is the most helpful for incorporating storytelling into more technical or data-driven presentations?
Yeah, really good question, and thank you. Really nice summary of what I tried to land today. So thank you. It's quite helpful. I think two very quick answers there. One is the online learning that I mentioned. Do some research there, how to present your first technical demo, how to present to a technical audience. That's a really good way. And the other one or two that I mentioned, see how others are doing it. Right? React community or the Reactor on YouTube, meet up technical speakers. So see how others are doing it. And last but not least, if you're not already involved, join one of the meetups that resonates with you. Go along and see how others are doing it. So learn, watch, and apply. Thanks, Nicole.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. And with that, I guess we didn't have any questions from the audience, but just a lot of thank you notes regarding the well thought presentation that you shared with us. I think some of us will definitely take this away and practice more with our, peers, our mentors, and of course, those who might be interested in joining the Toastmaster Club that Chris shared earlier. We did pop in the chat the link on where you can find a club that might be nearest to you within the New South Wales area. So with all of this, thank you all so much for joining us. I encourage each and one of you to reflect on how you can apply the storytelling techniques and tactics onto your own roles and responsibilities. And hopefully we hear from you in our next future sessions. I will drop Chris LinkedIn as well. So if there are any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to Chris or any one of us in this call. But thank you all so much. We'll make sure to pop the recording into our YouTube channel and share out the deck that Chris has presented in today's session.
So thank you all, and thanks again, Nicole. Appreciate it. And thanks, Michelle. I know you're driving, but thanks for having me as a speaker.
No worries. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you all so much, everyone. Hope you all have a lovely day for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Great. Thank you.